Circle of Birth podcasts, reclaiming our birth potential with ancient wisdom and stories from birth and beyond, sharing the rich spectrum of family diversity and transformation. Stories worldwide, bringing together community and connectivity. Come together with story medicine and inspire at our unique birth journeys. We breathe, we birth, we become. Welcome to episode 42 of the Circle of Birth, and firstly I just would love to extend my appreciation and gratitude to everyone that's been giving feedback about the show. I feel like it's really grown into itself over this past year, and I feel very honoured to be able to be in this space to channel and share these beautiful journeys. So with that, if you don't mind, and it's quite an easy process once you get used to it, leaving an iTunes review. That way it'll reach the wider community and it could be more accessible to people that might not know about it. So please do. So, ever wonder how a birth worker with over 12 years of birth experiences her first journey into motherhood? So sharing this episode with Jerusha Sutton, who's a birth photographer and birth worker, and an absolute oracle of wisdom. So this first time mama's birth is beautifully interpreted, and if you're looking for a beautiful floaty story, then this is the one for you. I guarantee it will leave lots of positivity and lots of understanding of the layers of pregnancy, birth, and seeing how Jerusha's journey in 2006 started her on a pathway to her heart-centered birth work. Hi Jerusha, thank you so much. It's 7:30 at night and you've just put your little boy Rudy to bed, and I really appreciate you taking your special mama time to share your story with us today on the Circle of Birth. So big welcome to you.
Thanks so much, Ali. It's lovely to be here, and it means I can sit in here and my husband can cook dinner instead of me. It's perfect.
What's for dinner?
Fish and salad tonight, I think.
Lovely.
Yeah. Simple. Simple.
So we want to explore your life and your birth, and I would love to, before you had your birth with Rudy, he's 10 months old, you were a doula and birth photographer. We are going to talk about birth time, and so how about we start off with, let's sort of flip back to around 2006 when you started as a doula.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, what triggered you into it?
So I am an actor as well, and I had been sort of, tripping around the acting circuit for a bit, and I went backpacking for a year around Europe on my own, and to support my time, in between acting jobs, I'd been, just doing all sorts of rubbish jobs that I didn't really enjoy. And before I went overseas, I had been the support person for a girlfriend's birth, which I absolutely loved. And then I went overseas, and, as I sat alone, in random hills in Italy and stuff, my thoughts drifted to what I was going to do when I went home. And I ended up making a promise to myself that I would go home and find something else that filled my soul, because I didn't want to, be working at being an actor until I was 50 and not find any success in that, and to have not, found anything else that I could really sink my teeth into. And so I came back after a year, and my girlfriend was about 5 months pregnant. And I said, and thinking back to that birth I'd done before I went away, I said to her, maybe I could be a midwife. And she said, you don't need to be a midwife. You need to be a doula. And I said, I've got no idea what you're talking about. And she said, just sit down and type it into Google. Just have a read and have a think. And so I did. And within about 10 minutes, I decided that was absolutely what I was going to do. It was just perfect. So she'd heard about doulas in her childbirth education class, and she just said, this is what you have to do.
How did you fall into, she just invited you into her birth space?
So this was another girlfriend whose birth.
Another one, right?
I was like, yeah. And I'd always had a really deep interest in birth. I remember as a child hearing, when family friends would have babies, and I'd, overhear snippets of their birth stories being told to my mum or, to people around, and I'd always be curious about the details and about, I distinctly remember hearing someone say, well, they had to cut her to get the baby out. And I remember thinking, why on earth would they have to do that? I always had a real curiosity about birth. And so when this girlfriend had invited me into her birth space, I asked her, I said, who are you going to have there? And she said, oh, well, I'll have my husband. And do you want to come along? I was like, yeah, I do. I really do. And she had a beautiful, it was a first birth. It was a beautiful, straightforward, it was stunning. And I felt really comfortable in that space. I didn't feel scared or, I don't know, out of my depth or, like it was all too big. I just felt really comfortable in there, kind of, just trying to keep her comfortable, doing whatever I could to support her. So I just loved it. So that sort of really, planted something inside me, I think.
What about your own birth? Did you get much growing up as a child about your birth?
Yeah, I have one brother who's 2 years older than me, and we grew up with a very healthy attitude towards birth in our family. My mum had 2 very straightforward births. One of them, my brother was induced, but that was pretty straightforward, and I was pretty straightforward. They were really, my birth story is actually really quite sweet. Just briefly, my grandmother was staying with Mum. She was due to have me. My dad had gone to work, and Nan was coming to stay to look after my brother. And Mum sort of was feeling a bit niggly, obviously, and Nan looked at her and said, you need to go to hospital, and you need to not come home until you've got a baby in your arms. And so Dad was going to work, so Dad just dropped her at the hospital on the way to, his work, and he went to work, and she went in and said, I'm going to have a baby today. And they looked at her and said, you're not having a baby today, love, go home. And she said, oh, well, I've got to wait until my husband goes home for lunch to pick me up. And they said, all right, and they put her in, just sat her in a room on her own. And at lunchtime, the lunch lady came around, to bring lunch in, and looked at her, and she said, do you want lunch? And Mum said, no. And she looked at her and said, do you need to have a baby? And Mum said, yeah. So they went and got, and called the GP, and as they did in those days, moved her down to the delivery ward, and she had me about half an hour later. So
wow.
It was just, it was kind of, low key, stoic, get on with it kind of stuff.
Yeah, I love your grandma too.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
That matter, she just looked at her and went, don't come home without a baby.
Yeah.
Love that. She knew.
That innate knowledge.
Yeah.
You can't beat it.
Yeah. So that was, so we grew up with, birth stories like that, which were not scary.
Yeah. And so heading into your doula work, can you describe what your first, you've already had the birth with your friend. What was your first sort of experiences like just being a doula?
My first doula births were really, really full on. I felt like my first doula birth, I learnt the lessons of about 20 births in that. It was a beautiful couple hoping for a birth centre, but straightforward birth centre birth, and in short, they had a really long posterior labour, ended up getting transferred to delivery ward. Epidural failure to progress, ended in a Caesar. This was all over several days. So by the end of it, I was an emotional, wreck. Just having seen this all unravel between, in front of this beautiful couple who I thought just, had it all laid out. So, and I remember halfway through that birth being on the phone to my beautiful trainer and mentor, and, her talking me through it. She could see exactly what was coming. So she'd sort of prepared me for what was ahead, but I really couldn't believe it. And so then I had a really complicated induction that ended in an instrumental delivery. And, so I really then, the reality of, I guess, the world of hospital interventions and when things don't really go to plan all kind of hit me in the face really quickly.
And did you find that invaluable nature of having a mentor available at that time to just really debrief those births? And
that was absolutely.
So I can imagine your mind would be, lack of sleep and racing mind and all that sort of heightened. I mean, it's like birth.
It still happens now, when you go to a birth and you've been there, for 24 hours and things aren't going, I'm still can be an emotional wreck at birth when things,
Yeah.
and you've got sleep deprivation and emotions involved, and you've got so much invested in this beautiful couple that, you're supporting. Still happens now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's why I think, we don't ever stop needing our teams around us.
Yeah, and that support.
The support.
Yeah.
We need it all the time.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so how many births do you think you've racked up in your 10-year span?
It's I don't know, around 100 maybe, but I really have lost count.
Wow. Did you count at one stage? Did you used to write them down?
Yeah, I used to.
Yeah.
And I probably could. I probably could tally it up now, but
Yeah.
I'm not very good at that stuff.
Yeah. And so you're mainly focused on postnatal doulaing at the moment?
No, I'm not
Yeah.
at the moment.
Yeah.
I did a lot of postnatal doula work. So after I did my doula qualification, I moved to London to be with my now husband, Andy. I lived there for several years, and I was doing full-time postnatal doula work and births. It's a busy town, London, and there's a lot of doula work to be had over there. So I was really into doing a lot of postnatal work over there, which I'm very passionate about. And then I found when I moved back to Australia, which was now about 8 years ago, the demand for it isn't really here. And I think the demand isn't here because people don't know that it's available or that it's a thing. I think Australians are much more geared to just getting on with stuff.
Yeah, I think there could be a lot more emphasis put on postnatal work for women, because we do focus a lot on the birth, and then we're left in the lurch like what do I do? And you're still going through that vulnerable time, transition, change. It's huge. It's a huge transition, and you really need that continual support to carry through. And I just think we really need to emphasise how amazing postnatal support can be, and important.
I totally agree, and I think it can really often make the difference between a woman enjoying her postnatal period and just enduring it. Just wishing it faster because they are just gutting through it. Whereas I really saw the difference with women who got a lot of support, and and it's a difference in support, especially with a postnatal doula who will go in and do everything around you to allow you just to care for your baby, as opposed to coming in and doing all the baby stuff. Which I guess a lot of the help that we maybe have here in terms of mothercraft nurses, they'll do the baby stuff, but a postnatal doula will come in and make you a meal and change your sheets and, run your errands and look after your older children and do all the things that you don't need to be doing at that point, so you can just focus on your baby.
Yeah, and it's using that really good intuition as a person to walk into a space and gauge what someone needs without being too invasive or knowing where to go and where to head. And I mean, I get such a buzz out of doing someone's washing or just doing the dishes. It's
it's much more pleasurable than doing your own.
Yeah. And it's really rewarding. You're like, that's...
Yeah. Oh, it's lovely to walk out of a woman's home and to just leave her with a meal on the bench, but no washing up to do and her clothes put away, and and then there's those other times when all that's needed is just to sit and listen and have a cup of tea, and sometimes that's just as important as anything else.
Yeah, well said.
Mm.
So, how do you feel? This is my favourite part, is getting into stories, and I would just love to hear your birth with Rudy. So how would you feel about starting off with your pregnancy and sort of journeying us through to the birth?
So Rudy was very much a planned pregnancy. Andy and I have been together for about 11 or 12 years, and we've been married for 3 years, and we fell pregnant, and we were absolutely stoked, and and the pregnancy was a dream. I mean, it was almost to the point where I didn't want to tell people how good I was feeling, because I didn't ever have any sickness. I didn't even have any tiredness. I mean, it was just extraordinary how good I felt the whole way through. And, it was such an incredibly exciting time, because having spent 10 years supporting women in their births, I had a very clear idea of what my plans would be for our birth. And so starting to put all of that into place was really, really exciting. So the pregnancy just went like a dream. I immediately booked in Jo Hunter to be my midwife for our home birth, and my two beautiful doula friends, Nadine and Lucretia, they absolutely had to be there. And I booked in Anna Todd, who is a dear friend of mine and a beautiful birth photographer. And I also invited my girlfriend Lizzie, who was the girlfriend who introduced me to what doulas are in the first.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she had a twin home birth that I was at about 9 years ago, and she's an amazing woman. She's a celebrant, does funerals and weddings, and she married Andy and I, so she had to be there as well. So we had this, kind of lovely team that we brought in around us, and the excitement as our pregnancy went on just built and built and built. It was lovely.
So what kind of preparation did you do prior to leading up to the birth?
Well, it was interesting, given that I, spent so many years supporting women through their pregnancies and seeing what sort of birth prep they were doing, and suddenly it was my turn. And so I guess I made myself a bit of a human experiment in a way. I just thought, the world is all there. There's so much that I'm curious about. One of the biggest things that I undertook was I decided to go to Vipassana, which is a 10-day silent meditation retreat. Is not the word, course, I guess.
Yeah, definitely not a retreat.
Really about it.
Had you done it before?
I hadn't done it before.
Wow.
And I'd been saying I'd do it for years. The same girlfriend who convinced me to be a doula had always said, you need to do Vipassana before you become a mother. Because she just swears that she used it, what she learnt there right through her birth and every single day in her mothering. And so I was like, yeah, I will. And then suddenly I was pregnant, and I was like, all right, I've got 9 months to knock this over. And I had, a bunch of doula clients lined up through my pregnancy. So it was pretty limited in terms of time that I had to do it. Anyway, I eventually found a slot that I could do. And that was when I was 30 weeks pregnant. So I took myself off to Queensland and went to Vipassana and did 12 hours of meditation for 10 days. 12 hours of meditation a day for 10 days at a silent retreat where you can't talk to anyone for 10 days. You can't make eye contact with anyone for 10 days. It's pretty intense.
So, like, all these questions are filling into my head. Just coming from, I did it, it's probably about near 10 years ago now. Okay. And I can really relate to what she said, actually. It's such a great birth prep because I relate it to birth. I think that
totally.
It was like that experience. I remember going through this transition point, and thinking, I need to get out of here. These people are actually trying to kill me. I'm in a cult, da-da-da-da-da-da.
Absolutely.
And so all these questions, firstly, how did you go sitting for that long and being pregnant?
Do you know what? Surprisingly, I was all right. I mean, I did have my variety of cushions and things, but I did sit just on a meditation cushion the whole time. I mean, as a pregnant person at Vipassana, they do give you a bit of special dispensation. They say you can have a seat to sit for certain sessions, and you can take sessions off if you like. And I had this kind of hell-bent head of, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it properly, and I'm only pregnant. It doesn't mean that I can't, And so I went pretty hard. And to be fair, my body was in really good kind of shape in terms of I'd been seeing an amazing osteo. I was really well aligned, and so the sitting was actually fine for me. It was the pain in all of my the pain in my joints was insane, but it was more like shoulders and knees and ankles and all other things. It was nothing to do with my torso or my back or my hips, which I, kind of expected it might be.
And did you make any, doing the scanning and going up and down?
Yeah.
How was that with baby? Was there any sort of lingering around there, or?
Yeah, it was really beautiful. I mean, one of the techniques is you're doing a body scan, head to toe, right out to your, fingertips and your toe, right down to your toes. And it was what was really yummy actually was that I would each time do a body scan of myself and then a body scan of the baby. So it was a really beautiful way for us to tune into that, to each other in that space. And I mean, having 10 days of silence of no one else to talk to but your baby is a really quite an incredible experience. You really, when you take all of the distractions away, the level at which you tune in with your baby is quite incredible.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think in pregnancy to detach yourself from all that external noise and information. I mean, that's it. That's a perfect space to do it, isn't it?
There is nowhere to hide from it.
And so when you left that experience, what was the feelings that come up for you? Inspection.
I mean, the process itself was really fucking hard for me. It was my personal marathon. Some people train to run marathons and it's something they really want to do and it's their big challenge. I mean, Vipassana for me was that. It was, it was terrifying and it felt like my Everest, but I did it and it took me 6 days to stop bawling my eyes out.
Yeah, me too. I was day 6 when the transition happened, and then at day 7 was like, oh, actually, I'm getting this.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I hadn't felt vulnerable throughout my pregnancy, but suddenly I felt really vulnerable, and I think that was about support. That I'd felt so supported in my pregnancy, and suddenly all of those people weren't there. I had no one to. So random kind of ailments were cropping up that I had to deal with on my own. So that was, one of my big lessons was, coming back to my independence and dealing with everything on myself. But, and then the light starts to just filter in, doesn't it, as you get through those last days. And then suddenly, I don't know, I felt like my heart just burst open on the last day. It was just incredible. I mean, it did take me the whole time to really get to a place of like, oh, okay. And I left there. I mean, people talk about coming back out into the world and being really overwhelmed and really, wanting to be reclusive. And I mean, I didn't feel like that at all. I was ready to be back out in the world. But the world was just so much more vibrant and beautiful and heightened. Everything was intense, but in a really good way. It wasn't like I felt overwhelmed and I wanted to hide from it. I really was just, like, my eyes were massive, just trying to take everything in. And I did really try to, hang on to that connection with my baby once, I'd left, because I felt that had been so great and intense and, delicious to really tune in with him like that. So, yeah, it was such a massive, that was a massive journey for me.
Would you recommend it now to people?
I would only recommend it to people who really, really wanted to do it. Like, I wouldn't say, just go and test it out, because it really does, it can mess with your head pretty massively. And it took every part of me to, stay there.
Yeah.
It really did. And, other people do it and do it all the time and find it really easy. I mean, it was really hard for me. I found it very, very difficult. And so, I would recommend it because I think it's an extraordinary thing. What I really wanted to do was I wanted to get into the back corners of my mind you know, dust out the cobwebs that I didn't know were there. And like in terms of birth prep, it was huge for me, because I didn't want to get into my labour and then, you know, find a part of myself that was, you know, a non-coping part, or a part, something that I wasn't expecting. I really wanted to explore what was in the deep, dark corners of my brain. So, yeah, that's what I really, you know, and I knew that it would be incredibly uncomfortable. I knew that it would be incredibly painful, and you know, so that for me was it was my birth training, really.
Yeah, and birth too. I mean, birth of your authentic self, and like you said, cleaning out that, you know, those cobwebs at the back, and really showing up to yourself. And
there would be points when I was sitting in a meditation, and, you know, every part of your body is just screaming, move. Like, you might not be able to walk for the rest of your life if you don't move now, because that pain is so bad.
Yeah.
And okay, this is a really intense contraction. What are you going to do? Are you going to pull the pin? You know, are you going to?
Yeah, I could just see the benefits in pregnancy, actually, like, of doing it. But like you said, you'd have to be really willing to do it.
Yeah, it was just that I wanted so badly to have it, you know, to have done it, that was the only thing that kept me there. So I wouldn't go willy-nilly, but it was amazing. But you know, the parallels of it, really sitting in there and imagining myself, you know, this is labour, okay? How are you going to do that? Stay with it.
That's perfect. Would you do it again yourself?
Oh, I remember at the end of it thinking, I'm really glad I'm going to have a small child soon, because that takes away the possibility of me doing it in the coming years. I can't even, because they say, you know, you can come back and do it every 12 months. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Sorry. I did have a beautiful conversation with one of the women there afterwards, and she'd come back after 6 years and done it again. And I said, why did you come back? And she said, because for the first one, I felt like I was just trying, it was just about endurance. It was just about getting to the end. And she said, and I wanted to come back and actually really immerse myself in the juice of the teachings, you know, to really, now that I know what it is, now I can be in it and really absorb more, rather than just, you know, gutting through it. And that kind of resonated with me. I thought, okay, I'm not there yet, but I can imagine at a point possibly I might.
Yeah. I feel that.
Like that?
Feel that exact same. You know, obviously, because I've had kids since then, and, you know, it's just not a possibility right now. Yeah. I think if I did go back into it and the opportunity opened, that would be the same thing. I'd be doing it because I was traveling in India, and we're in a place called Varanasi, and I was with a friend she was like, this is what I need to do. I need to go to this. Will you come? And I'm like, sure. I didn't even know what it was. I was like, okay, sounds good. I just shut up for 10 days and
sit around in bed. Yeah, cool.
I said, I've got this. I can do that. I just had no idea. So I think I spent a lot of the time, and it's like birth. I feel like that's how I headed into my first birth, was like, I've got this. I'm evolved. Like, you know. And I think a lot of those qualities in that first birth experience I had just naturally came through from the Vipassana that I probably didn't even know, but probably saved a lot of that experience from heading into a different direction, if that makes sense. And I feel that, I spent that first part of that Vipassana really not knowing what I was doing. And so, coming back into that, definitely I'd love to do it. But, maybe when I'm a bit more present and, you know, the kids are older and I'm in that space to really feel into it.
Worry about what's going on with them. Yeah, absolutely.
I just admire those people. I've got a friend that does like 40-day ones or 60-day or something once a year. That's her. That's what she does. And I'm just like, wow, that's a marathon, you know.
That makes my brain explode. To even think about that.
Yeah.
I think it's very admirable. hats off to those people.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, okay, that is just amazing, and I'm blown away. So what else did you do?
That was one part of it. And then Andy and I we decided to do an antenatal course. We did a course called She Births, and we decided to do that. It was a course that I was very familiar with because I had sat in on it as a doula, but I knew the beauty of those courses, and that course in particular. One of the biggest things I gleaned from it is that it made the men so empowered and knowledgeable about how to support, or the partners, to go into the birth space. And being, we had a big birth team on board, and I really wanted Andy to know his, to have his role, and to feel empowered in that space. So we decided to go to that, which was incredible, actually. It was a really beautiful weekend for us, and we came out of it. Andy said afterwards, he said, I feel like that weekend has shifted it from being your birth to being our birth.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
It was so, and I just thought, wow, that was worth every minute then, and thus it transpired. I mean, he was an amazing support for the birth. So that was a really great thing. People were saying, you're going to an antenatal course, all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, but, I get to sit in it from another part of my brain, and I get to sit in it with my partner, and I get to, and he gets to absorb it. It was great. It was really great. And then the other thing I did is that I went to Melbourne to see a beautiful lady called Fiona Hallinan, who works very closely with Jenny Blythe on the internal pelvic, I don't know, mapping, if that's the right word, but internal pelvic exploration stuff. So I went and had a 2-hour appointment with her in Melbourne when I was probably 34 weeks pregnant, which was utterly fascinating.
Yeah, so walk me through what the process is for people that might not really understand what that is.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, first up, she gave me a really incredibly in-depth anatomical lesson of the pelvis. And you think the pelvis and the uterus and how everything works, but she really got down to, the nitty-gritty of what ligaments and muscles are holding the uterus in place, and what bones, and what, how everything really works together, and gave me really good visual cues and, pictures and imagery about how that all worked. And that really took my knowledge of what was really happening. And I love anatomy. It really fascinates me. So how all the ligaments and muscles work in relation to the pelvis and the uterus, the bones. And it was just, that was incredible. And so then it goes into the physical part of it, which basically is a really long internal examination, vaginal examination. Not really an examination, though. It is an exploration. So, so Fiona's fingers in my vagina, feeling around, mapping out and exploring what goes on in there, which sounds the whole world in there. It's amazing.
And did you find during the process that stuff was coming up immediately, or she was sort of feedbacking what she was seeing or feeling? Or
I mean it was I guess for me it was more, I mean, a lot of people have a lot of emotional release with that work. There's a lot held in our muscle memory and our ligaments, and in that area. And for me it was really fascinating, just the physical tension I felt, and the choice to go into that and release all of that. And I mean, it was incredible. You think it's just, a small cavity, but, it suddenly opened up and felt like this vast kind of area that was so much more intricate than I kind of knew. And so it was it was incredible to know how far up she could go, and she could feel my baby's head, and she could, and at one point I was trying to visualize where her fingers were, and I said, where exactly are you in there? And she said, put your hand underneath your bum and find the bottom of your coccyx and push in. And I did, so hand underneath my bum and pushed in, and there were her fingers, so it was like, oh, that's where you are. Okay. And then she'd go, okay, then I'm tracking this, and here's the ridge of this side of your pelvis, and here's, and this is, and she'd touch on something, and I go, oh, whoa, what's that? She'd say, right, that's the ligament that, connects this and this, and that's why that might be tense, and that's what. So, and that goes on for quite a long period of time, and then she, at the end of it, so she sends you off with exercises to do it yourself and to get in there and to start releasing those parts that are holding a lot of tension. And one of the things that really stuck with me that she said was that all the baby needs is a relaxed vessel to find its way through. And so in doing this work, you're working towards making that vessel as relaxed as you possibly can, letting go of tensions that you might not know are there. So
that's kind of baby finding that path of least resistance.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And so, in the weeks following, I had exercises to do where I would get in and get into those spots that she found and really try and release them. And
you did that yourself, internally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's bloody hard to do it yourself. I mean, it's quite awkward.
Yeah.
With a heaving 35-week belly. But it was, and you can get other people to get it. You can get your partner or your midwife to help you with it as well. So that just, kind of visually opened up what was going, what was happening inside as well. That was just unreal.
Yeah, Jenny, when I spoke to Jenny and did a recording with her,
yes,
I said that we just need to speak again and just talk about the pelvis, because
I agree.
It just needs a space to talk about. It's so big, and there's probably a little understanding of people when they think of it, and the emotional language attached to it, and that energetic level of exploration. It's fascinating.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah. I don't know how, I'm really interested in doing her course, and I'm hoping that it aligns one day, but I just don't because I've not seen it done. I've got really short hands. I'm just like you said, I don't know how. It would blow my mind how the ability to sort of get far around that pelvic space. And it's I've got short fingers, and I don't even know.
Definitely, it's much easier for someone else to do. I think.
Yeah.
But it was just an incredible surrender for me as well. Fiona was just divine and just made me feel so comfortable. It didn't worry me at all, but then it was just, but it's a long period of time, and it was just a beautiful surrender for me to go, okay, let it go, and it needed that amount of time to, get my head around, okay, it's okay, just keep releasing, just keep letting it go.
Yeah, it's probably important to mention to people, if they're interested, that there's a lot of prep done beforehand to make sure, you just don't go there and then they stick their fingers up. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I felt very comfortable. By the time we got to that part of the appointment, I felt very willing and very comfortable, and she was just so thoughtful and kind the whole time. It was amazing. So I would recommend that to anyone, because that was just, it just fascinates me how much, all of that can affect the way your baby might come down through your pelvis, And
would you recommend that when do they recommend it usually? At what stage of pregnancy?
I'm not sure what they recommend, but I would say, do it. And, especially for people who've had babies in, interesting positions, persistent posterior or asynclitic heads, or, whether any of that's got anything to do with part of, anything that's going on within your pelvis that you might not know about, for subsequent pregnancies. I don't know. I just think there's a whole world knowledge there that these women are so onto that we really need to tap into.
Yeah, definitely. And you don't have to be pregnant to get it done either. It's very
Exactly
good.
right. Exactly right. I think the emotional effects, the emotional benefits that you can get from it are huge.
You're listening to the Circle of Birth podcast, circleofbirth.com.
Then I guess towards the end of the pregnancy, so Birthtime, the documentary that we'll talk about in a minute, was, I guess, conceived sometime during my pregnancy between Joe and Zoe and I. And then, so if we fast forward to when I was about 35 or 36 weeks pregnant, we did our first interview, which was Hannah Darlin for the documentary. And at that time, she was planning the Normal Labour and Birth Conference, which was to be on, which we were already going to, was going to be on when I was 37 weeks pregnant. And Hannah said, all these people are coming in from all over the world and you can interview whoever you like. So suddenly we were in this flurry of activity of, planning this conference, these days at this conference and all of these interviews and people to interview. So, there was a lot of birth time activity then. So the Normal Labour and Birth Conference when I was 37 weeks was this huge time of being surrounded by midwives and birth workers from all over the world and interviewing amazing people like Sheena Byram and Sue Down and people from everywhere. So it was this magnificent sort of week. And surrounded in midwives who'd come in and look at me and say, this baby's not far away, that baby's really low. And, there was a lot of this sort of, a lot of people implying that they thought it wouldn't be far away. And I was absolutely convinced that my baby would be a 42-weeker. Of, like, 100% convinced of having 10 years of, all of my first-time mums, so like the vast majority of them going well past their due date. And I just thought, yeah, that's fine. And so in my head, we were doing this conference and then I had my blessing way or my mother blessing planned for that Sunday, the day I was 38 weeks. And in my head, I then had a month to relax and to do all of those beautiful late pregnancy things that I hadn't been doing because I'd been working so hard. So we did the Normal Labour and Birth Conference and my parents arrived, and then on the Sunday we had this extraordinary mother blessing. With the encouragement of my birth team, we'd managed to plan the blessing way to end all blessing ways. It was held on Zoe's property in Bilpin in this amazing circle garden, and Jane Hardwick Collins held the circle, and it was just this unbelievable gathering of women and spirits. It was quite. I mean, the woo-woo was in full tilt that day. It was mind blowing, really. And so this oxytocin rush that I was just on from then, and then it's like, okay, now we relax. I'm going to go for swims every day and have sleeps. Anyway, on the Tuesday, so 2 days later, I woke up in the middle of the night and got up to go to the loo, and I left a trickle all the way down the hallway. Oh dear, I think I've just wet myself and went through that whole process. And of course my waters were leaking. And so I was in total denial that this could possibly be happening. Anyway, and I had no contractions. That was about midnight, on the Tuesday night, Wednesday morning.
So that was 37 and a half-ish.
You were 38.
Okay.
Yeah, 38 plus 2. And so we spent the next day in a flurry of getting everything ready that I hadn't really gotten ready yet. So setting up the birth space and threading my Blessing Way necklace and, testing all the things that Joe told us to do weeks before, like testing the birth pool for holes and all of that stuff. My parents were staying with us, so we shipped them out to a hotel nearby and had this sort of really busy day. And I said to Andy just before we went to bed, I said, I need to go to the ocean one more time before this baby's born. And so we went down to the ocean and had this beautiful walk in the dark at 10:30 at night. Came home, fell into bed at 11, p.m. and then was at 12:30 was woken up by one almighty contraction. And Andy went, oh, and so I planned. So Nadine, one of my doulas, lives 2 doors away, and our plan was, I'd always said, I'm going to call her in early. I don't want to be sitting outside myself trying to doula myself and trying to gauge when to call the others, because Joe and Lucretia live an hour and a half away. And I had this one contraction, and Andy said, we need to call Nadine. And I was like, are you crazy? I've had one. So, and then 2 minutes later, the next one comes, and 2 minutes later, the next one comes. And he says, I'm calling her. And so Nadine speaks over in her pajamas and her slippers and just sits quietly in the corner. And I was, trucking along with 3-minute contractions. And so after a while, she said, I'm going to call the girls. And so she called everyone in. So the women just trickled in, in the wee hours of the morning, 2, 3 a.m., which was really magical, like that, just having them all coming. I'd always imagined them all being here, and finally it was kind of happening. Anyway, so things were trucking along, and then I don't know, about 4 a.m., I think I got into the birth pool and stayed in there for about 3 hours. And over that time, my contractions went from 3-minutely to about 8-minutely. So everything really stretched out. And at one point, Joe said, do you want to just have a feel and see if you can tell what's going on? And so I had a feel, and she said, can you feel any cervix? I'd never given anyone a VE before, and so suddenly I'm having a feel. And she said, can you feel any cervix? And I said, yeah, I can. And I wasn't going to tell them how much cervix I could feel, because I was quite disappointed, and I thought, I don't want to disappoint them that I'm not as far along as everyone might think. So I didn't really tell. I just said, yeah. She said, is it thick? And I said, yeah. Okay. She was like, that's fine. Anyway, eventually the sun came up. I got out of the water, and, I was a bit sort of deflated. Everything had really stretched out, and I was exhausted and just wanted to sleep. And Joe, the girls said, do you want to go to bed and have a sleep? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, do you want to get up and have a baby? I said, I want to get up and have a baby. I mean, I really wanted to go to bed, but I knew I didn't want this to stretch out. And I knew I wouldn't be comfortable in bed. I wouldn't be able to sleep. And I kind of knew what was coming. So I'd heard over and over the stories of Lucretia's birth. They had Maggie Lecky-Thompson as their midwife. And I've heard the stories of Maggie hauling Lucretia around, pounding the pavement, to get her contractions going when she had a bit of a lull. And I thought, that's what they're going to do to me. Yeah, and so at 8 o'clock in the morning, they dressed me in my husband's tracksuit and put sunglasses on me. And Joe and Lucretia take me outside, arm in up, one on each arm, and they said, we're going to walk and we're not going to stop. And did they mean it? My God, we went. And contractions, I wasn't allowed to stop for anything. The only thing I was allowed to stop for was to vomit under a tree. And
it's like birth boot camp.
It totally was birth boot camp. It was hilarious. Or it looked like we were coming home from a big night out.
I was just about to say, it's like that shady when you walk out in the morning and
friends
had a big night. Yeah.
Swaying. I could barely open my eyes. And, everyone's on the school run and the commute. Everyone's on their commute to work. And the builders are all in building sites. And every time I'd open my eyes and peep, I'd just think, oh, God, I can't even see. Let's just keep going. So, but I had 8 contractions in 20 minutes suddenly, and so they were back. And so, rule was I wasn't allowed to sit down. So we came home and I just walked. I paced the hallway for, I don't know, hours, a couple of hours. And as long as I did that, my contractions were, it was happening, and I could feel the change. I could feel, the way the contractions were start to change. And at one point I asked to get back in the water. And they said, the pool's not ready. We've run out of hot water. You can't get in there yet. I was like, I really want to get in. And they said, why don't you just go and have a shower? Why don't you and Andy just go into the shower and, have a hot shower and just relax in there on your own? And in my mind, I kind of went, if there's not enough hot water for the pool.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Why could I go, why are they letting me hop in the shower? And I was like, I can't even question that, because a shower sounds like a bloody great idea at this point. So and of course they were lying to me.
So emotionally at the time, was your mind sort of in that comical sort of easygoing phase? Was there stuff coming up, or how were you?
I had a lot of emotional phases through the labour. I was sobbing in tears at one point. I asked Andy to put on a song from our wedding, and that just absolutely brought me undone. But there was other times when we were absolutely laughing our heads off. You know, and I don't. The good thing is I don't really feel like I was in my doula head too much.
I was just about to ask that, actually. Yeah, if your doula sort of self came into it a lot, or
the really beautiful thing was, I think because I drew all those women in around me, I knew that they were doing that job. I knew, you know, I knew they were all there to do that with their doula and midwife heads on, and so I didn't need to be in that space. So that was really not, you know, I remember when my contractions spaced out and I was lying there like, I probably should do something to change this, but they'll tell me, you know, and they did. So I trusted, I trust them all so implicitly that it was really easy to not be in that headspace. But, you know, I was chuckling at stuff through the, you know, knowing that they were going to haul me around the pavement, and knowing that they were lying to me about the bath. No, you know, but so it was such a delicious day. Anyway, so I got in the shower, and I think in first second that, I don't know, within minutes of being in there, I just had this almighty contraction that took me to my knees and had me really pushing, basically. And I put my hand down and felt a head. And I called Jo in. I said, Jo, there's a head. And she said, do you want to just stay in here and have a couple more contractions? And I said, no, I'm getting back in the pool, thank you. All right, and so I did. And then 40 minutes later, Rudy was born. Oh, wow. So, yeah. So, and, you know, in that 40 minutes in the pool was, you know, 40 of the most intense minutes of my life. And there was one point, well, I turned to Jo at one point and said, Jo, will it fit? Because I really didn't believe that it would. It didn't matter how many babies I'd seen coming out of women's vaginas. I did not think that one was going to come out of mine.
I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling, and I'm one of them. Like, you go through this quick, like, seconds of, like, how does this even fit? Like,
yeah. Because I was feeling, you know, his head as my contractions were happening, and you know, we were only to the kind of head-on view sort of stage. And I'm going, this is about as much as I can do. I've got a whole head to get out. This is ridiculous.
What did it feel like doing that inspection and feeling his head for the first time?
That was pretty magical. Yeah. It was half of my head was half of my head was in a mother space, and then half of it actually was in the birth worker space of, you know, always imagining what VEs are like, because, you know, you see them done all the time and you know intellectually what they mean, but you've never actually done one. So then I was like, oh, so this is what it feels like, and that's what, you know, and that's that bit and that's that bit. But then I was like, there is a head there. I can feel that. That's amazing.
So walk us through just that last part. Is there a lot of pushing, or he sort of, you know, did the water help with you?
The water was amazing. I mean, it was the most, God, the relief of getting in the water was unbelievable. I am a water baby anyway, so that was always going to be my happy place, I think. I definitely had to choose to go into that. Like, my body was pushing, but I had to choose. I distinctly remember pushing back away, trying to push into the back of the pool to back away from that sensation. And at a point, and I'm sure Jo said something to me that point about actually, you know, letting that happen and going with it and helping, you know, really kind of, and I had to choose to go into that at a point. And I did have that realization of that there is only one way to get to the other side of that, and this is through it. So
sounds like a big breakthrough, doesn't it, from that transition to motherhood, like that shell cracking and you having to make that, you know, that decision to do this.
Totally. And it was beautiful at that point. You know, we did have, you know, obviously quite a few people in our birth space, but at that point they were all there, but Jo was just right beside me, and it was her voice. It was just her voice that I needed to tune into. No one else was saying anything else. You know, it was that beautiful relationship where all I needed was her at that point. And, you know, her words were few, but really, really, but all I needed. And so I really did have to choose to go into that. And it was, I mean, you know, and it was a really intense kind of phase. But it was, you know, it was gradual, and it just kept progressing and progressing and progressing until eventually, you know, his head was coming. I remember the disappointment of feeling him going back up and then having to think I have to go all that way again and then further and then, but, you know, that was just so distinct to me. But then that feeling of, oh, my goodness, he's not going back. And having attended many births with Jo and having seen her talk women through, you know, the birthing a baby's head, and then suddenly it was me hearing those words that I've heard her say to other women. And that was really, I couldn't quite believe I was there at that point. And then his head was out, and then, you know, the world stopped for minutes, where my hand was just rubbing the back of his head, and I just couldn't believe. I mean, I didn't know it was a boy at that point. But, you know, just the world stopped. It was that magical time. And then Jo just quietly said to me, when your next contraction comes, I want you to push with it, and I want you to reach down and lift your baby out of the water.
Wow.
And that's exactly what happened.
And that feeling, can you sort of recount? I know it's so hard to describe it in words, but
it just to know that you can do that without anyone, you know, it's just you. It's just you. It was the most powerful moment of my life. It made me feel like I could do anything. It really was. And Jo and I had talked about that moment, you know, over and over. And to be fortunate enough for that to happen exactly as I, you know, as I really visualized was huge. It was so transformative, I guess.
And you just pulled him straight up to your chest?
Pulled him up out of the water, and he was a great colour, and he just, you know, he came out and he stuck his tongue out at me and his big open eyes. He was this funny little creature straight away. He was just magical. And then I just looked up, and all the girls are just around the pool with tears in their eyes, and Andy's right beside me just in disbelief. And it was just the best thing.
How did I love to sort of, I think it's really important to talk about partners, and I suppose virtually through you, Andy would be apt with birth and pregnancy and beyond. So how did he cope? Well, not cope, but how did he sort of go with those last moments, and what was his perception of that time when he came out, when Rudy came out into this world?
He loved it. He was incredibly calm. He was amazing. I mean, I'm sure underneath his heart rate was probably pounding away, but he was incredible, but he had such trust in Jo and in our team and in me, I guess. You know, he does trust the process, but, you know, that beauty of having the continuity of care of our midwife, that we talked about everything, you know, all eventualities through the pregnancy, and he absolutely trusts her, and he just sat back in awe. I mean, we'd always talked about him being in the water with me at the time of the birth. He chose not to, and not because he didn't want to, because he said, I asked him afterwards, why did you not want to get in? And he said, because when you were in the pool, it was like you were absolutely in command, and you needed, and that space was just yours. He said, and you didn't need me in there cluttering that and getting in your way. You were everything you needed to be. And so I know, right?
Oh, I love that.
Just got it. He just got it. And I was happy for him to get in. I didn't need him in there because I felt, you know, I had it. But, yeah, he just said, you didn't need me. You were totally in control. So that was just that was beautiful. I mean, he was amazing throughout the whole birth. He was right there. He was present. He was strong. He was calm. It was beautiful. And we were really conscious of that in the lead up, because obviously I was going to be surrounded by so many women in the know, I had all these birth workers around me, and we didn't want him to fade into the background without a job, without his role. But that didn't happen. They didn't let, and then we didn't let that happen.
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, it just, from listening to this story, it just seems that you were guided with so many hands nurturing the both of you into this journey, and to always emphasise how important the partner is, and, that they know you the best, they have that deep, innate, intimate connection with you that is that true understanding of you as a person, and to honour that for them. And it's essential to.
It absolutely is essential. And I always say to clients, I'm not there. There's always that concern that you will replace their partner. And I always try and say to them, I'm not there to replace your partner. I'm there to make your partner the best support person they can be.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's exactly what my team did for us.
Yeah. Yeah. What a beautiful story. I just want to touch on, I really like talking to people about this, about people that have worked in birth prior to having their first child.
Yeah.
What was it like now, reflecting on that? Was it a lot of moments come up where you're like, oh, well, now I really know what that bit's like? Or
I guess for the labour, for the majority of the labour, I don't feel like I was, I guess, surprised. I mean, it was such a journey of discovery for me, but I kind of, and every part of it was obviously new sensations and new everything, but I didn't feel totally surprised by it. I was amazed by the power of my body. I was amazed by about the power of what it was sending through me. That was astonishing, but I wasn't shocked by it, but I was pretty alarmed by the intensity of pushing that little head out. That was definitely, that was like, okay.
Yeah, I get that, yeah.
Wow. And that feels different for every person as well. So,
That's right, yeah.
What I experienced there is not going to be what my next client experiences.
And I definitely would say you probably emphasised the importance of postpartum care and looking after the mother.
Yeah. That was probably my biggest lesson, I guess, in that I had a bit of blood loss after the birth, and I was quite symptomatic of that for a week or two maybe. And, I had a little tear and I had hemorrhoids. I had all those things that kind of, add to your pain basket quite a bit in those postnatal kind of days. And so I remember being alarmed that, even though I'd had a really straightforward home water birth, a gentle birth for all intents and purposes, I still needed a lot of care. I was having dizzy spells, and I was having, I couldn't sit down for days and all of that. And I really, really needed lots of nurturing. And that sort of amazed me. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of support. I truly do believe in that fourth sort of trimester concept. It doesn't stop there once the baby comes out.
Absolutely not. So I had my parents down, after Andy went back to work, and that was really beautiful. It was just such a special time. I loved it. I cried at my 6-week appointment with Joe because I didn't want that. I felt like that was the real postnatal kind of phase over, and I just felt so held through that whole process, and I didn't want it to end.
Yeah, I think a lot of women, when you're fortunate enough to have that, when you're working with private midwives, to have that 6-week period, I know I felt the same for mine. Like I just got really upset in a good way. Like it was, but it was really like, oh, you're going to leave? Or,
right.
Like you're still in touch, but it's just that real realization that, okay, this is it now. It's
it's like the bird flying from the nest. But the hilarious thing for me is that all of those women are at my back door every second day.
Yeah.
There was never a goodbye in it, but there was
I mean, you've got like a true tribe there. You have just got this awesome tribe of women, and that's a lot of us are really. That's what we want. That sense of community and belonging. Yeah,
I've got it, and I feel like the luckiest woman to have that. It's the best.
I bet. Yeah, and that's the true essence of community, isn't it? Just having that and knowing that that's there. It's really important.
Absolutely.
So birth time. I'd love to talk about that. I've talked to Hannah. I've talked to Zoe. I've talked to Joe.
Yeah.
So you're it. It's like I've had this kind of. I think I interviewed Zoe last year.
Yeah.
And then Joe a few months ago, and Hannah. Last year. So I've kind of got this running dialogue of what's happening with birth time. So where's it at now, and what's it like for you now, having done this in your pregnancy and then have had your birth experience too? How's this sort of shaped the way you see things? And
it's just solidified the way I see things. When we started making this, I was coming at it from a place of having seen women for years in the difference between, say, hospital or obstetric care and then a continuity, a one-to-one midwifery kind of model of care, and the difference that made, particularly women who were home birthing and were in that community. I could see, I'd always seen the distinct difference in those models of care in my clients and friends. And then as the filming of Birth Time has gone on, I've gone through that experience for myself, and no surprises, just absolutely cemented exactly what I believed and what this documentary is about. It's trying to get that level of care to more women. It's trying to get more women, all women, coming out of their births with that amazing feeling, with being held and being supported and feeling respected and honoured, and like they've made their choices, and like they transform into the early days of their motherhood, feeling strong.
Yeah. And you guys formulated this sort of, I don't know what the word is, but it said, what will it take for women to emerge from their births physically well and emotionally safe? Is that right? Yeah. So how's that concept sort of heading out as birth time evolves?
We ask that question to everyone we interview. That's our last question we ask to everyone, and it's and it all comes back. All the experts, we've spoken to so many amazing experts, and it all comes back to the same thing. It's all about that continuity, that relationship with your caregiver. Yeah, exactly. That's all comes down to. So it's been this, evolving beautifully. I mean, Joe even commented the other night, if you look back through our Instagram kind of posts since we started filming, Bo was little. He was a few months old when we started, and I had this big swollen belly. And then as we go on, Bo's now bigger, and Rudy's come in, and Rudy's now, it's watching the babies grow as the documentary grows. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's certainly a beautiful project that you guys are birthing. And Homebirth Conference, you'll be releasing the trailer, I hear.
That's the plan.
Yay.
So where we're at now, I mean, it feels like, I know from the outside it feels like it takes forever, and it kind of does. And, we're three working women and, busy mothers who are trying to get this done currently on zero budget and in our spare time, of which, is pretty tricky to organise. So we've just slowly been, plodding away, interviewing as many people as we can and filming births and, conceptualizing the whole thing. And so now the plan is to get a trailer ready for the Homebirth conference in Sydney in November, to kick off our crowdfunding, because we're going to need funds to finish this. None of us are professional editors, and so that's going to cost, a chunk of money to pay someone to do that, and, for whatever else it needs to see it through to the end. And our plan is to, hopefully have it filming close to being done by the end of the year, and then we can start kind of pulling it all together.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I get a feeling that there might be a version 2. I mean, once you open that box, you could go on and on, couldn't you?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, the number of people we want to interview is just, it's kind of mind-blowing, and no one's really said no to us yet, I don't think. So we could just keep going and going and going. It's just one leads on to another, Yeah.
I found that with this podcast when I started it last year.
I bet.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, after interviewing Zoe and finding out about birthtime, and then just growing that into and finally getting to talk to you, and it's been beautiful evolution. And it's just the more that you hear these stories, the more you personally change in your own journey, and the more you just want to share it, because it's there, it's real. These are stories, and
absolutely. And I guess the three of us coming together, Zoe, Joe, and I are obviously birth workers and have been around this for years. But Zoe, is coming to this as a mother of two who's just had, her second birth being a totally transformative experience, and so it's kind of beautiful having the three of us coming from different angles of it. And Zoe's on this journey of discovery, of learning, this whole world, it's kind of unravel. It's beautiful to watch that kind of unravel.
Yeah, it reminds me of Jane Hardwick Collins. She says something similar about at this point is where we can change a consciousness around birth. It's when women have these transformative events.
Yeah.
And it's like the prime time to
exactly
create that shift and raise that consciousness level. And
yeah. So right. God, I love them.
Oh, I did a recording with her too, 2 podcasts
yes,
ago.
You
did? Yeah, good.
Binge podcasts, I've been binging on them like I binge on House of Cards. I've been binging on Circle of Birth podcasts. It's been great.
Yay, thank you. That just warms my heart to hear that.
Yeah, it's a nice back catalogue to work your way through.
Awesome. Just to finish off, your birth photography, and you've served a lot of people with that. Joe Hunter was telling me that you did some work with heartfelt photography.
Yeah.
I feel like I'd really love to just explore that a little with you and talk about
it. Sure. For anyone who doesn't know what Heartfelt does, so Heartfelt is it's an organisation of professional photographers around Australia and New Zealand who all volunteer their time to photograph stillborn babies and critically premature babies and terminally ill, very sick babies and children. So I felt drawn to Heartfelt after I saw a photographer friend of mine just put a post up about it, several years ago. It was before I'd really launched as photography as a profession for myself, I guess, and it immediately sort of struck me that is something that I could do. At that point, I thought maybe my photography skills aren't quite there, but I've got the heart for this work. And so it was actually one of my early inspirations in terms of I really want to get my photography to a level where I can join Heartfelt and help people. So I did just that. I joined Heartfelt, I don't know how long ago, maybe 4 years ago, and volunteered I guess, relatively, well, quite frequently for them over the years. I mean, the last 12 months, not so much. I stopped once I got to a point in my pregnancy where it was quite visible because, you know, it's not the most sensitive thing to turn up to to photograph a family who've just lost their baby, turn up with a swollen belly. So I stopped at a point in my pregnancy and, so I'm now trying to just carve out the time around Rudy to be able to step back into that. But, yeah, so for several years volunteered quite heavily with Heartfelt.
And so you would just basically get called in at any time. You'd sort of be on call, I guess.
Yeah, so we have an online group and we have area state representatives, and so the hospitals or whoever the caregivers are call the state reps, who then put the word out to whichever area, you know, and just say, you know, they'll give the details of there's been a whatever it is, whatever the case is with the family at such and such hospital, they need a session urgently today. Who can get there, basically? And then whoever is available puts their hand up and coordinates with the social worker to go to the hospital and photograph the family. Sometimes it's just photographing the baby if the situation sort of is such. Sometimes the parents can't bring themselves to be in the photographs, but they know somewhere deep down that they need a record. You know, they will want a beautiful record of this baby, and you know, so it's so whoever can jump in does at that point.
And this as you as a person, I could imagine a lot of things would come up for you doing this work, and has this given you a sort of a definition of, you know, what that true essence of support and care right through, you know, birth and death, so closely linked to each other.
They walk that path so closely, don't they? Yeah, absolutely. And I think the most important thing around that is not shying away from death. I think that's one of the biggest things. I think I knew that, but I think I've learned that more and more as time has gone on, you know, that shying away from people who suffered a loss and people who are going through their darkest days is you know, the last thing that they need. They need you to show up.
Yeah, that's well said. To show up, to be there.
It's to be there. You need to be more. You just need to be there.
Yeah.
You know, and it's been such. I mean, it sounds strange to say I love the work I've done with Heartfelt, but I've had just the richest experiences through it. And you know, I've formed friendships with many of the families that I photographed, and you know, you don't realise what you're doing, and you think you're just going, you know, along to take some photographs, but you end up becoming a really cherished part of their journey because you often are one of the only people who meet their beautiful baby, and that's such an honour, you know, to think that they've birthed this baby that they thought was going to be part of their lives, and it's taken away from them far too soon, and you're actually one of the few people who've gotten to really, you know, to spend some time with that beautiful little soul. So it's you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, even with Birth Doula, it's that same, you know, I'm in awe of being just there to be present with people in their most intimate time, and the death journey would be the same. And I mean, I'm, you know, just recently become a death doula, and I've still got a lot more to learn, and I just feel that when I do have my first experience serving someone and a family through the death journey, it'll be the same as birth, just being so honoured to be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it cannot be underestimated. And I really, you know, I feel like there is a shift. You know, there is a bit of groundswell around changing the way we view death and changing the way we deal with it and taking it back, you know, much like birth, taking it home, or taking it, you know, reclaiming it and making the choices around it rather than just being told how to navigate it.
Yeah. I just can't believe, since I've been exploring it so much, how people are starting to talk about this more, which is fantastic. There's just a lot more work coming out about it and exploring that journey. And I know with my birth of my second daughter, it was not long after I remember looking up into the to the ceiling, to the sky, essentially, and I was just like, this is how we should all be allowed to die. Like I just felt that deep connection to death and birth at that exact same process into that death journey, and I was just like, this is how everyone should be felt to die. This is how they should feel, like
totally
supported, loved, nurtured, honoured.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've got to have the conversation. We've got to start it with our families and, talk about it more and talk about our wishes and, really make it known and take the fear out of discussing it.
Yeah, and put a bit of laughter and fun into it. I've got all the documents here and it's ready to go to sit down with my partner, and I'm actually looking forward to having a bit of a laugh about our plans and.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my girlfriend, who I mentioned before, who had the twin home birth, who's a celebrant, and she creates these amazing, funerals, and she runs workshops in pubs. It's called How to Plan a Fabulous Funeral. I mean, it's the conversation is happening, and people are making changes. It is. We need to reclaim it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because when you have that outlook and that acknowledgement that death is there and it's a thing, and it's part of life, it's part of birth, it's their circle of life, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
My life has become so much easier. It's like, since I've ever explored death, the more I learn about it, the easier my life becomes. It's
That's it, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
Jerusha, thank you so much.
Ali.
I know you've got your dinner to get to. I'm conscious of that. So it was just an absolute pleasure to hear your story and gather some of your wisdom to share with everyone. I'm really excited about releasing this, so thank you.
Oh, Ali, it's been such a pleasure to spend the evening chatting with you. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. How can your website, do you just want to sort of yell it out so people can look at your beautiful photography?
Oh, thank you. I'm at jerusha.com.au. And the other one I'll throw in there is the Heartfelt website. Heartfelt is run purely on donations. Each session costs about $65 for us to process. So, any love in the Heartfelt direction is always much appreciated. And the Heartfelt website is heartfelt.org.au.
Thank you. I'll definitely put that in the notes too, so people can link to that. Birthtime, have you got a website yet, or is it just facebook.com/birthtimedoco?
The Birthtime website is coming, and it will be birthtime.world. We do have a Facebook page and an Instagram page, which is at birthtimeworld. That's the handle. Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Did this episode tickle your heart, move and rattle you in its wisdom? I hope you resonated with the show. Please head over to the website circleofbirth.com for show notes, including my personalised take on the episode, pictures, resources, and how you can connect with a storyteller. Sign up to the newsletter, and most importantly, please help this show grow to its full potential of serving you in its ancient wisdom. Donations made easy via PayPal. All donations will be received with love. Head to circleofbirth.com/donate. And yes, I'd love an iTunes rating. This has been another episode of the Birth Share Project. We breathe, we birth, we become.
We honor you and empower you.